It's episode 543 of the Locked On Texas Rangers podcast. On today's podcast, I'm going to be talking about the labor dispute update, where we are with that. Jack Leiter spoke to Rangers media, mainly Evan Grant, and also Josh Hamilton. There is some news about him. All that and more coming up on this episode of Locked On Rangers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On to the Texas Rangers. I am your host, Brice Paterik, here covering the Texas Rangers since 2014, doing this podcast since 2019, so I've been through the highs, the lows, and all that in between. But first, I want to thank you guys so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen of the day. If you're not already, go ahead and follow me on Twitter at Brice Paterik, follow the show at Locked On Rangers, and subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Now, there's a few different things to discuss today. I want to start with the bad news first. This is another upsetting story in a long line of upsetting stories about Josh Hamilton since his playing career is over. Former Texas Rangers outfielder Josh Hamilton, he has pled guilty to misdemeanor charge after being accused of hitting one of his daughters in 2019. In Tarrant County judge in 2020 of April, they indicted him on a felony charge, and the indictment came from an incident that happened in September of 2019, in which one of Hamilton's daughters said that he was violent with her during an argument. As a part of the deal, Hamilton, he has to pay his court costs and a $500 fine. He also has to attend parenting classes, anger management classes as well, and perform some community service, according to the DA. Court records indicate that he had already paid the fine and fees. That is thanks to some great reporting of the Dallas Morning News. This is another sign that things really did not go well for Josh Hamilton. Personally, professionally, everything went really off the rails for him after he left the Rangers. I think the support system that he had there was obviously great. He was doing well. He was playing baseball well and had a good system for him as a substance addicted person who suffers from addiction. It is a mental health crisis, and it is a disease, and it is something that needs a lot of help, especially for a guy. When you're making millions of dollars, you can get into a lot of things. It's a lot easier to get access to all these things, as we are seeing with the Tyler Skaggs case and how much access these MLB players have to illicit substances. And for a guy with substance abuse problems, being away from the Rangers, being away from that support system, probably isn't great, and it's looking like it might not be great being a part of that Angels organization as well. But this is just a really sad a really sad day for his family and for him. Just really hope that he can get the help that he needs and that his family can stay safe, because it seems like him being around them is not a great thing. And for a guy who helped me fall in love with the game of baseball and was my favorite player when I was first getting absolutely obsessed with baseball, this is just heartbreaking to see. And it sucks all around. Hope that this therapy, this court-mandated therapy and community service, can help him get back on the right track. He can find a support system and, be a better dad, because the reports have been coming out since he has stepped away from the game of baseball, not necessarily voluntarily, but they have not been good. So hope he gets all the help that he can. And let's move on to something else that's also fun. Actually, no, we're going to say that for a bit. We're going to talk later about the labor dispute and things like that, because I got a lot of thoughts on what's happening there. But I want to talk a little bit about Jack Leiter. He's finally at spring training. He's finally feeling the title of the article that Evan Grant wrote on the Dallas Morning News, which you should go check out, because it's a really great article. I'm pretty sure he's the only one who's there right now. Levi might be on the way, but with no major leaguers there, I didn't think that it would be a good time for me to go. Would have liked to go. I was planning on this being my first spring training, but it seems like that door has shut, and we'll try and get at it next year. But anyway, Evan's there, and he is talking to Rangers minor leaguers, specifically the big guy, also Smiley Pool photographer, great dude, great photographer, takes some great shots of Jack Leiter, and seeing man, that boy bulked up quite a bit. His legs are looking huge, and also he is just very excited to be in spring training. But he said he didn't feel like a minor leaguer yet, a professional player. He also lives in the dorms now. I don't know that he did. I'm sure he did it in some kind of dormy capacity. Maybe he had his own apartment in Vanderbilt. But he went back to school and worked out at Vanderbilt in the fall. He's also attending some virtual meetings with Vanderbilt pitchers, according to the article, which I don't really understand because he's not pitching for Vanderbilt anymore because he can't, because he's a professional now, because he has $7.8 million in the bank. Also kind of wild to think that a millionaire could be living in the dorms. That's just absolutely hilarious. Not like a future millionaire like a lot of the elite college athletes are, but like this guy, no, he already has several $1 million in his bank account right now with the signing bonus, which is just kind of wild and also funny. I'm sure he bought a house because, I mean, that's what Josh Young did in Lubbock. Also another story by Evan. And maybe he's living there while he is dealing with his injured shoulder. I'm not sure exactly. I haven't seen any more updates about Josh Young and whether he's going to have surgery or not or how long he's going to be out, but the initial timetable would put him back about the middle of March, which is not great, but hopefully it doesn't extend into being one of those really, really difficult shoulder injuries. But again, Leiter is there and he is feeling it, and seeing him in a Texas Rangers uniform is just, it's so beautiful. I know, and I deserve all the flack that I got for not wanting Jack Leiter at the time, but I stand by my reasons, and I also stand by immediately flip-flopping, because I did say beforehand, if the Rangers do draft him, it means they really like the guy and they really believe in him, and this guy has a whole lot of potential. Obviously didn't pitch with the Rangers last year because he pitched over 100 innings in college, which is a huge workload for a college kid, and the Rangers just wanted to make sure that he is rested. They're being extra cautious with him. They are making sure that everything is going just fine with their future hopeful ace, the big guy, the highest draft pick they've had in a long, long time, and hopefully the best one they've had in a long, long time. Really exciting stuff there. And I'm going to get into a little bit more about what he said. He also has a new pitch that I'm going to talk about in a second. But first, this episode is brought to you by Built Bar. You know, this time of year, I'm pretty much giving up on all my New Year's resolutions. Not this year. I'm sticking with my resolution to eat right, thanks to Built Bar. You know, it feels like, it doesn't even really feel like a New Year's resolution because they're just so dang good, and it's not like, okay, I'm doing this chore, I gotta go work out, which I skipped today because it's a winter storm that came up out of nowhere. And you know, when you're staying inside and it's wintry time and you just want some chocolate, and you know, chocolate kind of is a little, you know, a little fatty, but not when it's covered in a Built Bar, not when it's covering a Built Bar, when it's just pure chocolate and all kinds of other candy bar stuff. Those things aren't as good for you, but Built Bars, they're good for you. They are just as delicious as a candy bar. You can stick to that New Year's resolution of eating right. It's near the end of February, and the cold, dark months are coming out. You're trying to get that spring break bod, that beach bod, which I stand by my claim that any bod is a beach bod if it's on a beach and it is a body. But Built Bars, they are built different. They will help you be built different. So go to Built.com, use promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Now, Jack Leiter has a cutter. He is going to be a 5-pitch guy. He already had 4 pitches at Vanderbilt, only 2 really that he used. A third one he used a decent amount, and a changeup that just he didn't need. I mean, it's good. It's looking like a good pitch. The changeup is kind of what's going to take him from potential, like probable number 3, like definite at least number 3 to maybe 2 to maybe an ace, and then adding this cutter, which his dad Al Leiter threw a cutter, and so he's adding that as well. His primary pitch, obviously fastball. Curveball is right now the best pitch in his arsenal, but he's also got a slider, which some scouts think could be better than the curveball, which would be just amazing. Both of those, the curveball rates as a plus, I think, right now, with double plus potential. Maybe it's not quite plus right now, but the fastball is already plus, major, like borderline on double plus right now, sitting in the mid 90s with some great movement on it. Just looks absolutely nasty. Adding a cutter and making that changeup, which it profiles to be about average, if that could be a plus pitch as well, if he can have 3 70 grade pitches, who knows what the cutter will be, if that can be at least an average offering, and if the changeup can be above average to a plus pitch, that is some borderline ace number one starter type of stuff, which is really exciting. But anyway, here's some of the stuff that he had to say to Evan Grant of the Dallas Morning News. He said, "I don't think being a pro will really kick in until I get in the swing of things in a season. It's a nice routine that we are all out here, and that has been really good. But until there's a hitter in a different color uniform, an umpire, and some fans in the stands, the feeling isn't fully there yet." Evan Grant also talked to him and said that it's not out of the question that he could start the season in Double-A, which, oh my God, that would be an extremely aggressive assignment. But I think if there's anyone that has been drafted in the past couple of years that could do that, I think it's Leiter. He profiles as one of the most polished draft pitchers that has come out of college in the past 3-4 years. I mean, Casey Mize, who was a number 1 overall pick out of Auburn a few years ago, just rushed through the system. I believe it was 2017 when he was the first overall pick, and he has already pitched in the major leagues at this point. So, I mean, it really just kind of depends on the player as well. So, and he's one of those guys who's always, everything that talked about him, I mean, they all said 2018. Excuse me, that's when Casey Mize came to the system. I believe he made just a very short debut in 2020 and then pitched for basically the full season. Might have been shelved for a little bit. I don't think he might have had like 100 innings this year. Not a whole lot, but did pitch in the big leagues for a decent chunk of this season, just 3 years after his draft year. I think that could be a similar timeline to Leiter. Leiter might even be a little bit faster than Casey Mize to get through the system. But again, the Rangers are not going to rush him through. I mean, he's not going to see the major leagues like this year. That would be absolutely insane. Unless he goes out there, they start him in Double-A, he throws like a no-hitter pretty much every time. That would be insane. And then goes up to Triple-A towards the middle of the year and just absolutely dominates Triple-A hitters, and then might get like one start at the end of the year. That would be insane, though. There's a very small group of people who can get through the system, the entire minor league system, from 18 months or so after they get drafted. Not even 18 months, it'd be about 15 months. So again, like, this guy has a lot of potential. His dad is, I believe he's a Hall of Famer. I can't remember. He played 20 seasons in the big leagues and is an MLB Network analyst. Just a very, very good pitcher and a very good pedigree, and knows what it's like to be a big leaguer, has seen it basically his entire life and has been groomed for it. And hopefully will live up to all of that. But this is what he had said. His dad was a 19-year Major League veteran, Al Leiter. But this is what he said in talking with his dad, and referencing his dad at least. "There's always stuff to work on. My dad says you're never going to feel perfect. There's always something as a competitive athlete that you can feel you can improve on. And sometimes you have to kind of look back on where you were a year ago and compare it to today and realize how far you've come, because you were so focused on each day you don't realize that." And I think that's a nice approach, because he has gotten a lot better even last year. I'm sure, taking some time and looking back and being encouraged by your progress, and also not letting it discourage you, not getting discouraged. That kind of helps, I think, just for anyone in general. It's like, all right, well, where am I going? Where do I want to be a year from now? Looking back at where you were a year ago, I'm like, all right, well, sometimes I don't feel like I've made a lot of progress. And, you look back, like for me, I'll look at my podcast from like a year ago. This is going to be my 4th season doing this podcast. Looking back at what I was doing even a year ago, even 6 months ago, and seeing the progress from there, it's like, okay, I can see some progress there. It's encouraging. Sometimes I don't feel like I'm progressing as much as I should, but, just like anybody, you look back, there's some great advice, some great life advice from a 21-year-old. Pretty solid stuff for your number 2 overall pick. But again, it's just encouraging to see him in a Texas Rangers uniform, and I'm really glad the Rangers drafted him. I'm glad that John Daniels did not listen to my podcast, did not listen to my suggestions of, hey, just pick any of those 3 high school shortstops, all of which fell well below the Rangers station at number 2. So who knows? They got another high pick in this next draft, and hopefully they'll get a kid just as good, if not better, than Jack Leiter, or maybe they'll get Jace Young and unite the Youngs at the major league level, both of them hitting bombs in the infield. That'll be a lot of fun. But, again, I know much less than this front office, so I'm hoping that they don't listen to me. They just, go with their actual paid scouts and make an informed decision on that. But there's a whole lot of stuff to get into with the labor negotiations. There's been a little bit of progress, and one thing that I really want to talk about is the draft lottery that they are talking about bringing about. But first, I want to talk to you guys about BetOnline. Football season might be over already, but basketball season's in full steam as for pro and college hoops. There's the latest odds, player totals, player performance totals, where the next fired coach is going to land. BetOnline.net is the number one spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, news this season as well. It's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, UFC odds, rights to Olympic coverage. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action. All kinds of great stuff that you can bet on at BetOnline. I don't know if you can bet on when the labor negotiations are going to be reached, when a new deal is going to happen, when the lockout's going to stop, but I don't know. Maybe you can. Just go check it out at BetOnline, where the game starts. Now, let's look a little bit at this. I did some number crunching. What is being discussed right now is instituting a draft lottery, which, again, I don't love. I don't know if I've said that before, but I really don't love it. The only sport that has it right now is basketball, and I think that makes sense. And I have looked into the numbers, and, before we get into that, I just want to say this is the third day of players meeting. One of the things that they've made the biggest strides on is this draft lottery, and also a little bit about minor league pay, or the minimum pay of major league players. Those are the two of the things that they're working on the hardest right now, and I really think this is a bad idea in terms of the draft lottery. Now, the only major sport that has actually that's wrong. The NHL also has a draft lottery, but I don't necessarily think that they should either. And if they don't, the NFL should as well. So I've looked at the data from a pretty big sample size from 1970 to 1999. I've looked at all of the drafts from the four main professional men's sports: the NFL, MLB, NBA, NHL. Those four. And I've looked at from 1970 to 1999, so 30 years worth of drafts. I've looked at who has been drafted number one overall, specifically number one overall draft picks. I didn't look at number two, number three. I'm sure you'd find some similar data as well if you looked at some of that data as well. But here is the number of these 30 draft picks from, again, 1970 to 1999 in all these leagues. Here are the number of Hall of Famers in each sport. The NFL, 8 of the 30 draft picks in that time range were Hall of Famers. That's 26.7%. And the NBA, 12 of the 30 were Hall of Famers. That's 40%. You get the number one overall pick, you got a 40% chance at a Hall of Famer. That is fantastic odds, and again, makes a lot of sense why you would want to institute a lottery there. Completely game-changing if you get the number one overall pick. NHL, same number as the NFL. There are 8, maybe eventually 9. I'm thinking 9. There was one player. I'm not exactly a NHL expert, but Joe Thornton, I do believe, is going to be a Hall of Famer eventually. He is still playing, which is kind of insane how ridiculously long hockey players' careers can be. But you look at that same time range, 1970 to 1999, and how many MLB number one overall picks went on to be Hall of Famers or have been inducted into the Hall of Fame so far. There's still some that are on the ballot. But how many would you think? Would you think, okay, like eight sounds about reasonable. That's what the NHL and NFL have. Maybe less. Maybe it's 5. No, it's 3. There have been 3 Hall of Famers selected number one overall in that range from 1970 all the way to 1999. There's Danny Goodwin. Not Danny Goodwin. Harold Baines in 1977 of the Chicago White Sox, an outfielder drafted out of high school. Then we have to scroll down all the way to Ken Griffey Jr., 1987, and Chipper Jones in 1990. That's it. Those are the only ones who are there. Alex Rodriguez is still in there. If you want to count him, that makes 4. If you really want to stretch it a little bit more, then you can also put in where'd we go? Darryl Strawberry, if you feel really good about that. But I think he's borderline. I think it's close. So if you want to include those guys, you have 5, which is still significantly less. That is still 10% less. I believe that's 16.7%. If you go 5, if you want to be really generous and say 5, I think A-Rod counts. So maybe a little bit more than 10%. But still, if you go with how many are actually there right now, you have 10%, which is 16% less than the NFL and 20% less than the NHL and 30% less than the NBA. 30% less than the NBA. It's not just if you look at Hall of Famers, you look at guys who just straight up didn't make the major leagues. There's very few of these guys in the other sports that just don't make their league. Obviously, the NFL, they're all starting off right there. The NBA, pretty much every number 1 overall pick is going to start in the NBA. You're not going to have any G Leaguers. You're pretty much going to have that for their top 5, top 10 picks in the draft. Pretty much all of them are starting in the league. NHL, it's a little different, I believe. I think some of them will start at the highest level, but not necessarily all of them. Not exactly sure on that, but again, it's really such a difference from 3 to 8, like a third as many guys. It's insane how different this is, and they want to do that for the top 3 picks, maybe even I think MLBPA right now is on 4 or 5. MLB wants 3, which this is just not a good thing for baseball. The thing that's the problem with baseball and losing is not the teams that tank out. It's really not. The teams that go all the way to the bottom, because there really aren't that many teams that have gotten consecutive number 1 overall picks. There really are not that many. You want to think of the Houston Astros, who had 3 in a row? Well, let's see where that got them. Let's see, where'd we go? Okay, yeah, we have 2012 to 2014. In 2012, they draft Carlos Correa. Okay, that's a really good pick. That's a really, really good pick. They also could have had Byron Buxton, but settled on the signability guy. He's had a 30 career WAR. Mark Appel, who did not pitch for the Astros. Actually, no, he did not pitch for the Major League Astros. Made it all the way through the system, and might have made his Major League debut, but again, not a contributing member. Brady Aiken didn't even sign, was injured, has not played in Major League Baseball, and will not. So for every Carlos Correa, for every Bryce Harper, for every Joe Mauer, there is a Matt Bush, there is a Delman Young, there is a Brian Bullington, or a Josh Hamilton, who again ended up saving his career much, much later, but did virtually nothing for the Tampa Bay Rays. There's a bunch of Matt Andersons, Paul Wilsons, Chris Benson, Pat Burrell, all these guys who are, maybe they ended up being like just fine. Tim Beckham pretty much hasn't done anything. Dansby Swanson looks like a solid player, but the Diamondbacks, for whatever stupid reason, traded him to the Braves for not very much, I think like a year after he was drafted. And some of these other guys are looking like they're going to be fine to pretty good players. Casey Mize looks like he's going to be a pretty good pitcher for Detroit. Spencer Torkelson might be pretty good. Adley Rutschman is probably going to be really good for the Orioles. Royce Lewis in 2017 hasn't made his Major League debut. Mickey Moniak, I believe, has played a little bit for the 2016 number 1 overall pick for the Phillies, an outfielder out of high school. Again, just the difference in Hall of Fame players and the level of players that just don't play basically at all in the big leagues is just staggering. It's not as sure thing as the NFL or even the NHL or even the NBA. Like, there's just really not that many surefire number 1 home run picks. I mean, there's been quite a few in the NHL. There's Jack Hughes has been pretty good. Nathan McKinnon, Connor McDavid is pretty good at hockey as well. Taylor Hall, Patrick Kane, Alexander Ovechkin, Sidney Crosby. Like, those guys are really stinking good. The NFL, there's been quite a few pretty good guys as well. Joe Burrow seems like he's pretty good. Myles Garrett seems like he's pretty good as well. Andrew Luck had a pretty good career, even though it was short. Like, it's not the same thing. It's not even anywhere close to the same level. So I think this is a huge mistake for Major League Baseball and the Players Association. I don't know why they haven't looked at this, but the real problem is not just these teams that tank out. I mean, it kind of worked for the Astros, even though 2 of their 3 number 1 overall picks sucked. But it's the teams that are in the middle. The teams that are like Cleveland, like Tampa Bay, like Oakland, which thankfully it's looking like Oakland's actually going to stay in Oakland, which should have been the thing the whole time. But the teams that are constantly okay with being mediocre, the ones that aren't going to bottom out, because the ones that are bottoming out, like the Cubs and the Astros did, they're trying to win. They're doing that like, all right, we're going to suck for a little bit, and we are going to get some really good draft picks, and we are going to develop those guys and international signees, a big bonus pool, so we can sign some really good international players as well, and hope that a bunch of those guys turn out to be stars. The teams that are in the middle and okay with being in the middle for forever are the teams that are the problem, because they don't care about winning a championship. They're not going to bottom out to try and get those top picks. They might luck into it because they accidentally, tanked because they sold off too many of their good young homegrown players before they had actual, had to get paid. So again, I think that's the problem with Major League Baseball, not these teams that are bad. Because look at the Pirates. Look at how good having high draft picks have been for them. They've been perpetually mediocre for most of their entire history. They did have a pretty good 5-year stretch. But outside of that, they have a lot of number 1 overall picks that have not panned out. I mean, Garrett Cole panned out somewhere else. A few other guys that have been high draft picks for them panned out somewhere else. So looking at Henry Davis, I think will be pretty good for them, who was the number 1 overall pick. But again, number 1 overall picks in baseball are nowhere close to a surefire thing. So I think this is a huge, huge mistake for Major League Baseball, because a draft lottery in this sport is just wrong. If they're not going to do it for the NFL, which they probably should do it for the NFL, if they're doing it for the other sports. But I think Major League Baseball is the one sport that does not need a draft lottery and will actively be hurt by a draft lottery, because I swear to God, if the Cardinals just barely miss the playoffs one year and end up lucking into a generational star with the number 1 overall pick, and I'm going to be really pissed for a long, long time. And it's not just them. There's plenty of other teams that could do that. But I think that the teams that are actually tanking, they're going to still tank. This isn't going to prevent them from tanking. They're just going to have to be a little bit smarter with their picks. So I think this is a mistake, and hopefully Major League Baseball, this is the one thing that I'm rooting for ownership on. Pretty much the one thing that I'm rooting for them on, because I don't think that this is the way to fix tanking. I don't have a better solution. This is a attempt at a solution. I don't think it's a good one, but I don't blame the players for trying, but I kind of hope that this is something that ownership gets them to cave on. But that's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Rangers. I'll be back hopefully on Friday with another episode with Grant, talking a little bit more about Jack Leiter and some definite expectations for him this year. But thank you guys so much for listening and subscribing, and until next time, don't forget to enjoy baseball.